To the dismay of the right, conference voted for compulsory reselection of MPs and for an electoral college of unions, members and MPs to choose the leader. For Tony Benn, this was a moment of political triumph.
Really, he was a man whose hour had virtually come. It looked as though all he had to do was lift his little finger and the bastions would fall, and he would inherit. He was so close to power, you could almost feel it at that point.
The Gang of Three believed the Labour Party was now in the hands of the left. But in the hotels and bars of Blackpool, the right fought a desperate rearguard action.
It will have to be a fight of passion and of conviction. And to anyone else who aspires to lead the Parliamentary Labour Party and this Labour Party, it will have to be a fight of passion and conviction. We're fed up with the fudging and the mudging. We're fed up with slush and mush. We want courage, fight, conviction, and hard work.
It was really a call to arms from the centre-right. And it was, I'm afraid, a speech which really was asking Jim to step down because he wasn't going to fight. And why should he fight? You know, Jim Callaghan had had a distinguished record. Chancellor, Exchequer, Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary, Prime Minister. He'd held the whole 4 top jobs. And for him to be dragged down into the mire with Tony Benn was a really terrible end.
For James Callaghan, the saying that all political careers end in failure was brutally true. Tony Benn may have been his downfall, but the responsibility for defeat lay at the door of the trade unions. Their bloc votes could have saved him from the left, but the unions were all in favour of having more say in the choice of leader.
Jim had achieved a great reputation, not only as a national figure, but as a man who sheer bluffness, common sense, and good-humoured intelligence would normally carry people, and particularly carry people in his own party, and particularly his old trade union friends. And it was their, as it were, desertion of Jim, which I think was really so sad at the end of his career.
2 weeks after the conference, Jim Callaghan announced he was going to stand down. His final act as leader was to wreak revenge on Tony Benn. By resigning when he did, Callaghan triggered a leadership election under the old rules, where MPs alone voted. That autumn, Tony Benn consulted with his closest political allies. He wanted their advice on whether or not to stand in the election of a leader to replace Jim Callaghan.
The view that we took, those of us who had been involved in the big changes that had taken place, was that this was an illegitimate election. It was being held deliberately to outwit the conference decision that had been taken the previous September, and that by standing in that election, which Tony was very keen to do, he would be giving legitimacy to something that otherwise had little credibility. And so we were anxious that he shouldn't run, and this was virtually the unanimous opinion among all my colleagues, and it was very hotly argued because Tony saw this was an opportunity that was going to slip away.
Callaghan's intention in resigning when he did was to ensure the succession of Dennis Healey, whom he regarded as his natural heir. But Healey proved to be his own worst enemy. Often described as the best leader the Labour Party never had, Dennis Healey was a fearsome debater and in his time a politician of international stature. The Conservatives regarded him as a formidable opponent, but his Labour colleagues found that too often his brutal attacks were turned on his own side.
He couldn't stand fools gladly, which you've got to do in politics. The other art you have to have in politics is the art of peddling bullshit. Saying something that you know is not true and is not going to happen simply because it gets you one leg up the ladder. And the really successful leader can listen to a fool, an idiot, and say, yes, I agree, yes, you're quite right, I'll bear that in mind, yes, I'll... Now, it's an art of its own, and Healy didn't have it. If people were idiots, he told them they were idiots, and he didn't get their votes.
He is a thug, and he, over the years, I think, gratuitously or otherwise, offended large numbers of his colleagues on one occasion or another. I remember him prowling up and down the gangway on the occasion of one vote, swearing in the most dreadful language at his colleagues.
I think I didn't perhaps cultivate people as much as I should, and I think the best remark about this element in my personality was Roy Hattersley, who was a very loyal supporter, said once of me, "He bites your legs." And I think that was making enemies unnecessarily, something I got perhaps from my father.
But Healy also cultivated a jocular style, which sat uneasily with his reputation as a political bruiser. He appeared on comedy shows and in Nationwide's Christmas pantomime.
And where do you think you're going?
We're off to see the wizard.
You are a lot of silly billies. You know nobody can see the wizard unless they get a note from me.
Will you give us a note?
Certainly. That's B flat.
He had an unusual sense of humor. When we used to meet him, prior to budgets and things like that, he was most amiable. He'd rush to you like a comedian and, you know, spar with you, things like that. What do you do now, young Evans, and all this sort of business. Now, to me, that Michael Foot never adopted this sort of flippant approach at any time. And I think this is the reason why I, along with some other colleagues, thought that he would be acceptable, not only to the party, but to the country as well. I genuinely believed that at the time, and hence the reason for supporting Michael.
Okay, there you are.
Michael Foot, the favoured candidate of the trade unions, was a left-winger nearing the end of a long career in politics. He inspired a deep, almost protective love in his friends.
He didn't want to run, and I didn't want him to run. But due to a series of circumstances and the pressures which prevailed upon him, especially from trade union leadership, he did run in that weekend in the early winter of 1980 when Jim Callaghan said that he was standing down. And so I called him and I said, well, you know, I don't think you should run, but if you are running, then I'll work like hell for you. So I did.
On the 10th of October 1980, Michael Foot returned from Dublin, where he'd been lecturing on his beloved Jonathan Swift. But he still wasn't prepared to announce his candidature.
Are you able to say anything? I can't say anything at the moment, so it's not much good.
Are you able to say when you'll be making the announcement?
Well, probably this afternoon, but I've got a few people to talk to first, you know.
Well, where will you be
so I can't help
sir?
you, you know.
Now, I wasn't the ideal person to do the job, of course. Now, nobody at the age of 67 or whatever I was at the time would have been. However, it did look at them as if I didn't stand, that the election would lead to the real deep, permanent split in the Labour Party, which all of us at the top of it wanted to avoid.
Michael Foot had made his political reputation as a fiery orator and a rebellious left-winger. In private, by contrast, he was famous for his courtesy and kindness, qualities which had made him a successful party manager during the dying days of the last Labour government.
Hello, Michael.
How are you?
You have to climb up all those stairs.
Yes, I have indeed. It's all out of order.
Come and sit down.
But his colleagues on the right were convinced that he was utterly lacking in the ruthlessness essential in a party leader.
Book for
Yes,
the
I've had a proof,
June the
actually.
26th.
Okay.
Michael Foot is the sweetest of men and also a brilliant writer. I mean, a lovely man personally and a marvellous journalist, and the last man on earth who should have been the leader of a political party, especially at a time of acute crisis. Because Michael was a compromiser. Michael was liked to relate to people